My 13-year-old niece giggled while opening the $850 phone I bought her. If you disappeared tomorrow, no one would even notice. All 30 guests laughed. I nodded, pulled out my phone, and with 2 taps shut down every payment I made for them. The silence that followed was deafening. My fingers had moved with muscle memory, accessing the banking app I'd installed 3 years ago when I first started managing their finances. Credit cards, auto pay utilities, mortgage assistance, Lindsay's car payment, everything I'd quietly arranged to keep this family afloat, gone with 2 swipes. I stood in that living room, surrounded by 30 faces that suddenly looked foreign to me. The birthday cake sat untouched on the kitchen table, its candles unlit, but I could feel the fire burning in my chest. My sister Lindsay finally looked up from her phone, a satisfied smirk still playing on her lips, like she'd gotten exactly the entertainment she was hoping for. Mom continued stirring something in the kitchen, pretending not to have heard, but I caught the slight lift of her shoulders, silent approval of her granddaughter's cruelty. Dad didn't even pretend. He chuckled, raised his beer, and muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Well, she's not wrong." The laughter rippled through the room like a wave. My cousins grinned, Uncle Gary snorted into his drink, and even the neighbors who barely knew me beyond these occasional gatherings found it amusing. They were laughing at the walking wallet, the family ATM who just took a joke too seriously. But what they didn't know, what none of them understood, was exactly who they were laughing at. I'm a senior financial analyst at Bradley & Associates, pulling down $127,000 a year, with bonuses that often push it past $150,000. I have connections at 3 major banks, 2 law firms, and a network of financial advisors who owe me favors from years of referrals. I've spent the last decade building a reputation for turning around failing portfolios and identifying financial vulnerabilities before they become critical. And for the past 3 years, I'd been running their lives like a charity case. "Thanks for the phone, Uncle," my niece chirped, already absorbed in the glowing screen, leaning into her mother's side. I watched her delicate fingers swipe across the device I'd researched for weeks, comparing models and features to make sure she got exactly what she wanted, the same fingers that had just delivered the sharpest insult I'd ever received. I didn't say a word, I just nodded, because that's what I'd always done. Nod, smile, pretend it didn't hurt. Pay the bills, fix the problems, be grateful for the privilege of being useful. But as I stood there, my heart beat too loud and my face too hot, something different was happening in my mind. The analytical part of my brain, the part that had saved dozens of clients from financial ruin, was running calculations. Lindsay's monthly expenses, $3,200. My contributions, $1,800. Mom and Dad's mortgage assistance, $900 monthly. Dad's credit card that I'd been paying down, $847 outstanding balance. The phone in my niece's hands, $850, plus the $75 monthly service plan. Total monthly exposure, $3,622. Annual cost of being their family, $43,464. The numbers were crystal clear, just like they always were when I analyzed a failing investment. The return on this particular portfolio was a negative 100%. "All right, everyone, let's cut the cake," Mom's voice rang out, bright and cheerful, sweeping away the tension. But the bitter taste of it clung to my tongue as I moved to the kitchen, leaning against the counter while they gathered around the table. Candles were lit, wishes were made, and I watched my hands curl into fists. That's when I felt my phone buzz, the banking app notification confirming what I'd just done. Every automated payment, every credit line, every subscription I'd set up for them over the years, all terminated. The financial safety net I'd woven so carefully around this family had just disappeared as completely as they seemed to want me to. I slipped out without saying goodbye. No one noticed, of course. That was the one thing my niece had gotten absolutely right. But I didn't go home. Instead, I drove straight to my office, even though it was a Saturday evening. I needed to think strategically, and I always thought best in my professional environment, surrounded by the tools of my trade. I had work to do, and it wasn't the kind that could wait until Monday morning. My office building was nearly empty, just security and a few workaholics like myself. I settled into my chair, opened my laptop, and began doing what I do best: analyzing a complex financial situation and developing a comprehensive strategy for maximum impact. First, I pulled up every account, every payment arrangement, every financial connection I'd established with my family over the years. The scope was staggering. I'd been supporting them in ways I hadn't even fully tallied until that moment. Lindsay's rent, I'd been the co-signer and had been covering the shortfalls for 2 years. Mom and Dad's mortgage, when they'd faced foreclosure 18 months ago, I'd quietly arranged a loan modification and had been covering the difference between what they could pay and what the bank required. The credit cards were even worse. Dad had a gambling problem he thought no one knew about, but I'd been watching his spending patterns for months. Every time he got in too deep, I'd quietly transfer money to keep him current. Mom's medical bills from her surgery last year, $8,300 that insurance didn't cover, paid in full by me, with the understanding that they'd pay me back when they could. They never even mentioned it again. Then there was the broader ecosystem I'd created. I'd gotten Lindsay's boyfriend a job at one of my client companies. I'd written the recommendation letter that got my cousin into the graduate program that led to his current career. I'd co-signed my uncle's business loan 3 years ago when his credit wasn't sufficient. I wasn't just their ATM. I was their entire financial infrastructure. And they just laughed while a 13-year-old told me I was worthless. I spent 4 hours that night building what I called my impact assessment. Every connection, every co-signed loan, every favor I'd granted, every professional recommendation I'd provided. Then I began making phone calls. Even on a Saturday night, when you're a senior financial analyst with a solid reputation, people take your calls. My first call was to David Brennan, the branch manager at First National, where I'd moved most of their accounts for better interest rates. David, I need to discuss some changes to the Palmer family accounts I referred to you. There's been a significant change in their financial situation. 20 minutes later, every account I'd vouched for was flagged for immediate review. Without my income verification supporting their applications, most of their credit lines would need to be reassessed. David was apologetic but firm. Bank policy required fresh income documentation when a financial guarantor removed their backing. Next, I called Jennifer Hayes, the VP at Consolidated Holdings, where Lindsay's boyfriend worked. Jennifer, I need to inform you about a potential conflict of interest regarding the Ryan position I recommended last year. There have been some personal developments that might affect my professional judgment. It was carefully worded, completely ethical, and absolutely devastating. By Monday morning, Ryan would need to reapply for his position without the benefit of my professional recommendation. Given his marginal qualifications, his prospects weren't good. The third call was the most satisfying. Marcus Rivera, the loan officer who'd handled my uncle's business financing. Marcus, I need to formally withdraw my personal guarantee on the Peterson Auto Repair loan. I'm transmitting the documentation tonight. Without my guarantee, my uncle's loan would revert to its original terms, significantly higher interest rates and monthly payments that his struggling business could barely manage. It was all perfectly legal, carefully documented, and financially devastating. By 2 a.m., I'd systematically dismantled 3 years of financial support, with the same precision I used to restructure failing corporate portfolios. Every safety net, every backup plan, every quiet intervention I'd made on their behalf was being methodically removed. But I wasn't finished. The real strategy required a more comprehensive approach. Sunday morning, I drove to the family house with a black backpack I'd prepared. Inside were copies of every financial document, every payment record, every loan application where I'd served as co-signer or reference. I also included a detailed spreadsheet, the kind I typically prepared for executive presentations, showing exactly how much I'd contributed to each family member's lifestyle over the past 3 years. The house was quiet. Everyone was sleeping off the previous night's celebration. I let myself in with the spare key I'd had for years, the key they'd given me when I became the family's unofficial financial manager. I left the backpack on the kitchen table with a simple note. Since I wouldn't be missed, I thought you should see exactly what you won't be missing. Then I drove home, packed a suitcase, and checked into the Four Seasons downtown. If I was disappearing, I might as well do it in style. I had earned enough comp points from business travel to cover a week in their best suite, and I wanted to be somewhere with excellent room service when the phone calls started. They began Monday morning at... Dad's voice was tight with panic. "What the hell did you do?" The mortgage payment bounced. Lindsay can't access her account. You need to fix this right now. I was sipping coffee on the suite's balcony, watching the sunrise over the city skyline. I'm sorry, who is this? I'm having trouble placing the voice. Don't play games with me, boy. This is your family. My family? I kept my voice conversational, the same tone I used with particularly dense clients. That's interesting. I was recently informed that if I disappeared, no one would even notice. So I decided to test that hypothesis. The explosion of rage was immediate and predictable. Threats, demands, accusations, all the usual tools bullies use when they realize they've lost control. I let him exhaust himself before responding. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice calm and professional. You're going to hang up this phone and figure out how to manage your own finances. You're adults. You'll adapt. You can't do this to family. You're absolutely right, I agreed. I can't do this to family. Fortunately, you made it very clear that I'm not family. I'm just someone who wouldn't be missed. I hung up and turned off the phone. The next few days were blissful. Room service, spa treatments, and the kind of deep, uninterrupted sleep I hadn't experienced in years. No crisis calls, no emergency transfers, no frantic messages about overdue bills or unexpected expenses. For the first time in 3 years, other people's financial emergencies weren't my responsibility. Thursday afternoon, I decided to venture back to my apartment. I was curious to see what kind of desperation had accumulated in my absence. The scene outside my building was better than I could have hoped. Dad was pacing in front of the entrance, looking haggard and desperate. When he saw me, his face lit up with twisted relief. "There you are! We need to talk!" "Do we?" I walked past him toward the entrance. He grabbed my arm. "Listen, you can't do this. You're my son." I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back at his face. "I was your wallet. There's a difference. We raised you. We gave you everything." The laugh that escaped me was sharp and genuine. "You used me, and now you're panicking because your ATM quit working." His face twisted with the old familiar rage. "You ungrateful little—" "Finish that sentence," I suggested calmly. "Please, I'd love to record it and send it to Mom." He deflated slightly, realizing that his usual intimidation tactics weren't working. "Look, we can work this out. Family helps family." "You're absolutely right," I nodded. "Family does help family. So I'm sure your family will help you figure out how to pay your own bills." I walked into my building, leaving him standing on the sidewalk. Through the lobby windows, I could see him pulling out his phone, probably calling for backup. But I had already anticipated their next moves. That's what strategic thinking provides, the ability to stay 3 steps ahead of predictable reactions. Friday afternoon, I received exactly the call I'd been expecting. Lindsay, her voice shaking with barely controlled fury and desperation. "You need to fix this. Ryan lost his job. We can't make rent. Mom and Dad might lose the house." "That sounds terrible," I said sympathetically. "Have you considered getting second jobs? I hear the service industry is hiring." "This isn't funny. You're destroying our lives." "I'm not doing anything," I corrected. "I'm simply not doing everything anymore. Turns out there's a significant difference." "Please." And now her voice was cracking. "I didn't mean what I said. We were just joking around." "Here's the thing about jokes, Lindsay. They're supposed to be funny for everyone involved. When only one side is laughing, that's usually called bullying." The silence stretched between us. I could practically hear her trying to figure out what combination of words might convince me to restore their financial safety net. "What do you want?" she finally asked. It was the perfect question, and I'd been preparing the perfect answer for days. "I want you to understand something very clearly," I said, settling back in my office chair. "For 3 years, I subsidized your lifestyle to the tune of over $130,000. I co-signed loans, vouched for credit applications, paid emergency expenses, and covered shortfalls. I did this because I believe family takes care of family." "We know, and we're grateful." "No," I interrupted. "You're desperate. There's a difference between gratitude and desperation, just like there's a difference between family and a financial resource." I could hear her crying now, soft hitching breaths that might have moved me a week ago. "You want to know what I want, Lindsay? I want you to succeed. I want you to figure out how to manage your own life, pay your own bills, and build your own financial security. I want you to discover that you're more capable than you thought you were. But we can't. You can, I said firmly. You'll just have to do it without me. Think of it as a growth opportunity. Saturday evening brought the final confrontation I'd been anticipating. I was at O'Malley's, a quiet bar near my office where I sometimes met clients for informal discussions. I was enjoying a craft beer and reviewing market reports when Dad walked in, looking around until he spotted me. He'd clearly been drinking, and his approach was a masterclass in barely controlled desperation, attempting to masquerade as authority. "We need to settle this like men," he announced, loud enough to draw glances from other patrons. "Please, sit down," I gestured to the chair across from me. "You're making a scene." He sat heavily, his hands shaking slightly as he tried to project confidence he clearly didn't feel. "This has gone far enough. You've made your point." "Have I? What point do you think I've made?" "That you're angry, that your feelings got hurt. Fine, we should have been more sensitive. But this is cruel." I studied his face for a long moment. He looked older than I remembered, worn down by a week of actual financial responsibility. "Let me ask you something," I said quietly. "In the 3 years I've been managing your finances, how many times did you say thank you?" He blinked, clearly not expecting the question. We appreciate." "How many times?" I pressed. The silence stretched uncomfortably. "How many times did you ask how I was doing? How many times did you invite me to dinner that I wasn't paying for? How many times did you treat me like a son instead of a service provider?" "That's not... we don't..." "You don't," I agreed. "You took my money, my professional reputation, my connections, and my time. And when a 13-year-old suggested I was worthless, you laughed and agreed." His face was flushing red. "She's just a kid. Kids say stupid things." "Kids repeat what they hear adults say," I corrected. "What she said wasn't original. It was learned." I finished my beer and signaled the bartender for another. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "You're going to go home and figure out how to be adults. You're going to pay your own bills, manage your own finances, and solve your own problems. You're going to discover whether you can maintain your current lifestyle on your actual income, or whether you need to make some adjustments. You can't just abandon us." The word abandon hung in the air between us, and I let it sit there for a moment. "I didn't abandon you," I said finally. "I stopped enabling you. There's a difference, though. I understand why you might not see it that way." Dad's mask of controlled desperation finally slipped completely. "You little bastard, after everything we did for you." "What did you do for me?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Specifically, what did you do for me that wasn't something parents are supposed to do anyway?" He opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. Nothing came out. "Because I can tell you exactly what I did for you," I continued. "I have spreadsheets, receipts, bank records. Would you like to see them?" I pulled out my phone and opened the financial summary I'd prepared. "Lindsay's rent assistance, $43,200 over 2 years. Your mortgage help, $16,200 over 18 months. Credit card payments, $12,847. Mom's medical bills, $8,300. Various emergency expenses, $23,920. Professional favors and connections, immeasurable." His face was pale now. "Total quantifiable investment in this family, $104,467. Total recognition or gratitude received, 0. Total respect shown, negative." I put the phone away and leaned forward. "So when you say after everything we did for you, I'm genuinely curious what you're referring to. Because from where I sit, the transaction flow has been remarkably one-sided." He stood up abruptly, swaying slightly. "You're going to regret this. You'll come crawling back." "Maybe," I acknowledged, "but probably not. See, the thing about financial analysis is that it gives you clarity about which investments are profitable and which ones are just money drains disguised as obligations." I raised my fresh beer in a mock toast. "You've been reclassified." 3 months later, I was settling into my new normal when I received an unexpected call from my cousin Jake, the one I'd helped get into graduate school. "I heard about what happened," he said carefully. "I wanted you to know that not everyone thinks you were wrong. It was the first contact I'd had with anyone from the family since that night at the bar. "How are they doing?" I asked, surprised to find I was genuinely curious. "About as well as you'd expect. Dad got his job back, but they had to downsize, moved into a smaller place. Lindsay's working 2 jobs now. Turns out she's actually pretty good at managing when she has to. Mom's been talking about getting work for the first time in 15 years. And Ryan? Found something else. Lower paying, but he seems more motivated now. Funny how people adapt when they don't have a safety net." We talked for another few minutes, carefully avoiding any suggestion that I should reconsider my position. Jake was smart enough to understand that bridges once burned don't rebuild themselves just because the weather gets cold. After I hung up, I realized something had shifted. For months, I'd been waiting for regret to set in, for the guilt to overwhelm my resolve. But sitting in my comfortable apartment, looking at my healthy bank balance and my stress-free calendar, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: genuine contentment. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is your niece. I'm sorry for what I said. I didn't understand." I stared at the message for a long time. She was 15 now, old enough to understand consequences, young enough to learn from them, I typed back. "I appreciate that. I hope you're doing well in school." "I am. I'm working part-time to help with bills. It's actually kind of nice feeling useful." There it was, the lesson I'd never been able to teach through generosity, learned through necessity. "That's good," I replied. "Take care of yourself." I didn't hear from them again for 2 years. When I finally did, it was Jake again, calling to tell me that Dad had passed away suddenly, heart attack at 62. The funeral was in 3 days. I went, of course. Whatever else they were family, and death changes the mathematics of grudges. The service was small, attended mostly by old friends and distant relatives. The family I'd supported for so long looked older, worn by years of actual responsibility, but also somehow more solid. Lindsay had a quiet confidence I'd never seen before. Mom looked tired, but seemed genuinely grateful for the modest life insurance policy that would carry her forward. After the service, Lindsay approached me carefully. "I know you probably don't want to hear this," she said, "but I need to thank you." I waited. Not for the money, for stopping, for making us figure it out ourselves. I never knew I could handle things until I had to. She looked around the small gathering. "We're all different now. Smaller lives, maybe, but they're actually our lives. Dad was proud of that before he died, proud that we were making it work." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "The thing is," she continued, "I think if you hadn't cut us off, we'd still be the same people we were 5 years ago, entitled, dependent, taking everything for granted." She paused, looking directly at me. "So thank you, for caring enough to let us fail, and for being strong enough to let us figure out how to succeed." As I drove home from the funeral, I realized that the best thing I'd ever done for my family was the thing that had felt the most like abandoning them. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's weakness. They learned to stand on their own, not because I supported them, but because I finally stopped carrying them. And in the end, maybe that was what family was supposed to do after all.